Okay, well, it's 12 o'clock by my clock, so I will make a start. I'm Nick Rousseau. Some of you know me, having seen me in various events, others maybe not. But I'm set up the Woven Network, and with Adam and David and Matt and Chris, we run it. And so we thought it'd be a good idea in these challenging times to have some kind of gathering opportunity for people to get to speak to one another, however constrained. And Zoom seems to be a good platform for that. Everyone's pretty familiar with it. So I'm going to be chairing and hopefully making this into a useful thing. I'm looking at you two square. What I'm proposing as an agenda is what we all introduce ourselves briefly. We have three speakers, Joe, Thomas and Ben, who have asked to have a slot. So for each of those, they will speak for maybe 5 minutes. I think Joe has got some slides to present. And then there'll be an opportunity for people to respond with questions or comments or information. But we're going to ask you to raise your hand virtually. Hopefully you're familiar with that. There's a thing at the bottom called reactions, little button there. And that's how you then indicate that you'd like to speak, and we can unmute you. That's it, yeah, like that, Ben. It's just, because otherwise you get a lot of people cutting across each other, and it can feel more kind of wasteful of time that way. But this is the first one. Small child in the background there. So at the end, very keen to get any feedback from people on how this could have been managed better, or how in the future they'd like to see it done differently. Further points then, we are setting this to record, but that initially is for our own purposes, just so that we've got a good record of what's said. But at the end, I'm going to invite everyone to comment on whether they're okay for what was said to be disseminated, because I think it's useful for people to hear if there's some interesting discussion. But obviously everyone needs to be okay with that. I think that's probably enough from me. The sequence in which I'm proposing to have the speakers is Joe from University of Nottingham going first, and then Thomas Constant from BOBIA, and then Ben from the Veterinary Invertebrate Society. So there should be an interesting range of speakers on different aspects of insect protein and insect farming. Is everyone okay before we launch into the agenda? Anyone got any concerns or questions? I might turn my video off because that sometimes helps me to hear better what's going on. I don't think you necessarily need to see me. Okay, can I invite Joe to take the chair to speak?
Yeah, see if I can. Oh, I can't share the screen, I don't think. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, we can't see you, certainly.
Sorry, I'm using Zoom on my university. Oh, there we are. I just can't seem to share the slides, but I can do it without. That's fine.
KOLADE? Okay, no, I'll use my phone.
Okay, so I'm an assistant professor at the University of Nottingham in food science. And in the division of food, nutrition and dietetics, we are doing quite a lot of active research in insects as food and feed. So just to sort of introduce us, we go across the whole food chain. So we have experts in insect rearing and looking at the nutritional value of insects, from them to almost myself, where we look at the processing of insects and how they can be used in food with a benefit. So they can be used as a flour, but they can also have functional uses. So we can do that. And the safety, so we look into the microbiology as well as the nutrition, and then we go even further into really how consumers accept and rate and want to like products with insects.
I've made my first error as a chair.
I don't know what I did.
I've just realised I've made my first.
It's fine. That's all.
Okay.
So what did you press?
So someone should be muted, maybe. Thank you, Joe. I realised I did tell everyone I was going to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. So you've introduced yourself. Can I cut you off at that point and then see who else is in the room? Apologies. Okay, so Ben, do you want to go next? Can you unmute. I don't know if David can unmute you.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, my name is Benjamin Kennedy. I'm an invertebrate vet. I have an interest in honeybee, zoological invertebrates and their diseases, and that sort of extends into insect rearing and insect disease. And I'm sort of here to sort of hear a bit more about what people are doing well, what people are not doing well, and sort of working out how to apply veterinary principles to invertebrate species. So I won't go on to, because if I'm just introducing myself, I'll keep it very short.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. So Anne-Clothilde, you go next.
Yes. Hi, I'm Anne-Clothilde Guyot. I'm working for Biopolymer Solutions, and we are part of a project, an agri-tech project, with Joe actually, about making high-protein expanded snacks with insects in. So we are very interested in knowing what's happening in the UK.
So are you in France, I'm guessing?
No. Biopolymer Solution is an SME working from the University of Nottingham, but doing research.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. Yeah.
Okay. I happen to be French, but I'm working for an English company based in Nottingham.
That's fine. Okay. Thanks, Anne-Clothilde. Val Street, you go next.
Hello, I'm also from Biopolymer Solutions. So basically, Joe, Anne-Clothilde and myself work together. So we're just interested in the getting food with insects. So that's all I can say, really.
All right, thank you. Thomas Constant.
Hi, I'm speaking later, so I'll keep this very brief. But I'm Thomas, CEO of Be a Buyer, and we've developed an insect growing pod that empowers people.
Thank you. David Moss.
Hi there, my name's David. I'm not actually a insect farmer as of yet, but I'm just looking to see if it's a viable business moving forward and perhaps a way to recycle food waste effectively for permaculture users.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer? Jennifer?
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Hi, sorry, apologies, a few technical issues. Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm based up in Scotland and I'm also a prospective insect farmer. I'm here to obviously learn a bit more, introduce myself to everyone. Hi. And I'm definitely not also sneakily working at the same time.
Okay. Matt Holt, is that?
Yeah, that's me. Hi. I am the head of the entomology wing of a company called Entacycle. We're based in London. We specialize in technological development in mastering of black soldier flies.
Okay, thank you. I've got something that says KOLADE and JADE. Don't know who that refers to. Introduce yourself.
My name is Nero.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Nero. I'm representing Green Network charity. We're interested in black soldier fly farming. That's.
Thank you. Where are you based?
We're based in Linfield, but we do the charity work in Nigeria.
Ah, okay, thank you. And then Jeff Knott. Hot bar.
Hello everybody. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, my name is Dr. Jeffrey Knott. I'm based in Surrey and London, and my company is HOP, and we have sell cricket protein bars in the UK. I'm looking to expand into other products.
Great, thank you. And then I'll invite Adam and David to just introduce themselves, part of the Woven team. Where's Adam? Adam.
Yes, hi. Yeah, so I help with the Woven Network, and I also run Instar Farming, which is a UK-based cricket farm. So at the moment, we're producing about 200 to 300 kilos of crickets per month. We've got capacity to increase that to about 400 if the demand is there. We've also just moved into a new kitchen facility, which is giving us the increased capacity to produce our cricket powder. Most of our crickets are going into a cricket powder. And most of that's sold wholesale, but we've just gone live on Amazon and on our website this week, which is exciting. So those products will be sold under the Bug Vita brand. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And David, completion. You're muted.
Hello, I assemble the newsletter when it comes out, and I'm interested in a cyclical economy to recycle waste into a usable form.
Great. Okay, thank you. So let's return to Joe with apologies and invite you to continue your presentation, your talk.
I mean, it's quite nice because Val and Anne have introduced themselves. So one of the main reasons that we wanted to get involved with this network is because we currently have a AgriTech 8 project, which is funded by the UK government, and it's got a focus on looking for solutions to food and nutrition challenges in Africa. So we have a current collaboration with a academic institution in Nigeria, and we are looking, well, we are currently in the process of developing a high protein snack from insects and local carbohydrate sources. So it's a consortium of mainly UK, but we have this academic institute in Nigeria. So Anne and Val introduced themselves. They're from Biopolymer Solutions, so that's an SME based in Lincolnshire, I think, somewhere around that, Leicestershire, sorry, and another SME in Leicester, Real World Business Solutions. And both of those have a lot of expertise in manufacturing. There's then myself from the University of Nottingham that has quite a lot of interest and expertise in insect protein, and again, like this functionality. So not that it's just a flour, but it can actually give structure to a food product and make it quite exciting. And what we wanted to do was just introduce what we're doing, which is about trying to understand the functionality, but also produce a product that doesn't go through lots of processing, so doesn't necessarily make a protein extract, but we still get functionality for a snack product that would have a long shelf life. So one of our real interests in Nigeria is making a product that could be made from local material that could then serve that local community, could also then be transported to other parts of Africa for maybe nutritionally challenged consumers, but also maybe more of those developed areas where there's a real demand for a snack product, but using materials local to Nigeria. So we are currently, like I said, in this project, and the insects we're looking at are palm weevils, grasshoppers, and crickets. And we've been really lucky that we've been able to source palm weevils because of the palm wine farming industry in Nigeria. So that's a big industry, but there's obviously palm trees that we can then harvest the grubs from. So we can get palm weevils. We find it really quite difficult to source crickets. So although Nigeria has quite a history of consuming insects as food, they have quite a wild harvest process and serve when they're in season and at various different locations within the state. So it's not a formalized type of farming as is such in Nigeria, from what we can understand in Ambria State. So what we are actually doing is we're in the process of setting up an insect farm in the University of Nigeria, Lusaka, and we're going to try and breed crickets. So we're looking at the best way of farming them to get the best nutritional and safe sort of status of our insects, which then we can sort of incorporate into a food product. And some of the interests that I have, and it's just almost to share what we're doing, because we're looking all the time for collaborators. So in terms of collaborations in any of the insect farming, but also what I'm quite interested in is although insects have a lot of benefits, and I know this group will be very much promoting the benefits of consuming insects, as a food scientist, I'm very aware of some of the risks that can come, and they're not insurmountable, but I think as people in this network and in this supply chain, we have to be responsible for controlling some of the risks. So when you think about insects, some of the risks could be anti-nutrients, they could be bacterial hazards, they could be chemicals such as heavy metals, pesticides, insecticides. There is a risk of extinction, so we're very cautious of how we touch insects from the wild because of the impact on the ecosystem. and also, of course, the allergenicity of eating insect proteins. And basically, I kind of wanted to just share with what we're doing, that we're controlling this from a supply point. So we're trying to have a known traceable supply chain. We're trying to monitor chemical levels, bacteria levels. We are trying to put in hygiene practices. We're trying to have guidelines for farmers in Nigeria so that we can get the most suitable supply. And then from my perspective, we're also going to try and control the processing. So we're looking into how we can process insects to make them safe, sustainable, but also nutritious and typically tasty. So it's really just a flag to this network that we're doing work in this project. We're looking for collaborators for further projects. So if anyone's interested in this area of looking at incorporating insect protein into snacks, or whole insects into snacks and food products, just to get in contact with me, it's joanne.gould@nottingham.ac.uk, and you can find it on the university website, etc. So yeah, just to share what we're doing in this space of trying to incorporate insects into food. I think that's all I wanted to really introduce.
Thank you, Jo. That gives us, I think, a good flavour of it. It sounds like you're moving from the whole insect farming to insect food products, which I think relates to a lot of what people on the group are involved in different shapes and forms. I've got some comments to make, but I'll open it up. Does anyone want to go first? No, maybe I'll just kick off then, just while people think. I'm in touch with a farmer. I don't think he's a farmer, he's a business person in Burkina Faso. They also have a significant culture of eating insects, both from a palm worm, but they also, he also is looking to export what they call the pilgrim cricket, which essentially is the locust. And one of the things that I think is a potential opportunity is because the locusts are massively they're taking over a lot of East African countries because they're swarming in huge numbers, is finding ways in which we can benefit from them, if you like. But I'm conscious, as you say, that there are risks. You have to avoid any that have had sprayed with pesticides and the like. We had a bit of a debate at the Novel Food event earlier in the year about the risks of people eating insects. And obviously novel food restrictions are quite substantial in Europe now. But I'm not aware of any cases, and you may know of some, of people having actually been fatally affected by eating insects, or indeed having even been very ill. I know there's clearly the allergenicity risk that we're very conscious of whenever we promote the eating of insects. It's an interesting question for me, that there's a lot of risks of us running out of protein and people starving, but the contra risk is clearly there, but I don't know how big it is.
I think it's a risk it can be controlled. I think what we're learning is the big difference between insects and livestock is you eat the intestine, and that's where your risk is. So I think what we're doing is that we're aware it can be controlled, but perhaps at the moment, they have a high microbial count. There's data saying that, but you can reduce it. So it's just being careful about how we process them. In Nigeria, there's cases of ataxic syndrome, where if certain insects are eaten in the wet season, they can cause a neurological disease, because I believe the insects have thiamies in them, so they break down the thiamine that you would normally get from your diet, and then that can cause a neurological disease. There's also been a couple of cases in Africa of botulism because of not checking the microbial safety of the insects, particularly over storage. They're quite rich in nutrients. It depends on their moisture content. So I think from our perspective, there's a risk, but with careful control, you can reduce that risk. And we just want to make sure that we are doing that, and they're not, because like you say, they offer so much potential nutritionally and sustainably. We need to make sure that they're there as well in terms of safety.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Again, still looking for people who might want to come in. I can continue the conversation. It's a fascinating one. I think risks are always things you have to balance.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
I would say, so as a vet, I always recommend to all of my clients that feed their exotic pets or anything else invertebrates that they never take invertebrates from the wild, for two reasons basically. One is the pesticide insecticide reason, which I think is actually quite appreciable. I don't know the human literature well, so I'd be very fascinated, Joe, if you could send me those papers. But I do know that I have certainly had cases of reptiles and other animals that have had issues when they have been exposed to insecticides and pesticides. And it's probably something that we vastly underappreciate. So, you know, neonicotinoids have a really significant effect on solitary bees, but they undoubtedly have some effect on other things too. And actually the levels of fipronil and imidacloprid and other pesticides in our wildlife are quite appreciable. So it is quite concerning if somebody is collecting food from the wild, perhaps less concerning in Africa where pesticide use may be less or maybe more, or maybe regulated differently, but it is a concern. The other reason is actually wild insects tend to be vectors for pathogens for numerous animals, particularly other inverts, but also for reptiles and other things. So I tend to recommend that people feed their pets a well-isolated, well-kept insect or well-kept feeder. So I think it's actually a very interesting point that Joe makes. Again, fascinating area of research, and I imagine quite a challenge because you're sort of battling a set of perceptions that people have about animals and where they're collecting them from. And it might well be that actually, I mean, the other problem you have is the extinction and ecological aspect, because again, I've had that before where somebody is collecting insects from their local area, and what they're essentially doing is they're feeding their own animals, but they're starving all the local wildlife. And if you have a huge need for insects, that certainly if it gets to an industrial level and you're vastly over exploiting your habitat, insects particularly tend to be the rivets, they tend to be at the bottom of the pyramid, so you undoubtedly have quite dramatic effects, wherein you actually catch some of those people some of those animals that are higher up, and you're poaching those animals. It doesn't necessarily have the same effect as it would if you were taking the bottom echelons of the ecosystem. So very interesting to me. That's my input onto it, really. I'll mute myself.
Thank you.
Really
I think there is an important distinction between farmed and harvested insects. Certainly, I know of a number of cases that I've heard of where the overexploitation of wild insects has caused ecosystem damage, and is partly what's driving the push to farming insects. So I think mopane caterpillars are another case in point, that they're being overexploited, but there are ways in which people can farm them. And then, as you say, potentially you can reduce the risks to the consumer, but also the risks to the ecosystem. Any other comments, or shall we move on? I think that's been really helpful, and people can contact Jo and her team if you want to get in touch.
Could I ask very quickly?
Yeah.
For Jo, was I right in understanding you're based in Nottingham and you do some work in Nigeria?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
oh, sorry, I was just going to wonder if you know of someone based in Uganda who could help you out, because they have a company. I met them last year at an event. I'll just put the link in for you. I can link you with the founder of it. But they harvest from the local countryside and sell just domestically. And they do shea caterpillars and another bug, I can't quite remember. But yeah, they employ the local workforce and do all that type of thing.
That's really useful. Yeah, that'd be really interesting. Thank you.
Not too far from Nigeria. Yeah.
I've got interest in this in Africa, different like Kenya, a bit of a looking at this, and I say there's a business in Burkina Faso, at least two I can think of. Okay, let's move on then. So in terms of the ordering, I'm just doing this on the basis of people who kind of signed up. So that means Thomas is next. Thomas, do you want to take the floor?
Hi everyone, I'm Thomas. Apologies if my internet fails. I might actually just I might just stop the video if it's too bad. Yeah, sorry, my internet's a bit poor. Hi everyone, I'm Thomas. So I'm CEO of Be a Buyer. And so we're a very early stage startup, and we're looking to release our first product on July 7th, so a few weeks away. We're launching which is all about kind of reducing the impact on society, reusing resources, and rethinking views towards food. And so we're basically designing a small insect growing pod that empowers people, no matter where they live, in urban areas, it can go anywhere, to empower them to produce their own source of sustainable, healthy, and nutritious protein through the form of mealworms. And so just a little bit of background about myself. So we're an early stage startup. I'm CEO Thomas, and my background is as an industrial designer. And so it was while I was an industrial designer that I and my passion for sustainability, where I wanted to come up with a household product that would empower people to grow their own food. As I'm sure we're all aware, like there's a lot of food innovation happening, especially around kind of pre-made bars, like like we heard earlier today, cricket powder in protein bars, for example. There's a lot of innovation happening in the food sector, and I was just kind of when I first started researching, a bit shocked that there wasn't much innovation happening around kind of home manufacturing, as if if you don't live with a garden, there's not a lot of space to, you don't have a lot of space to grow your own food. So there's quite a lot of restrictions. So that's why we developed a small pod that can be placed anywhere in your home. It doesn't matter if you live in central London, Berlin, New York, anywhere. You can have this small pod that actually produces edible insects that you can turn into basically delicious food. So this is so we're launching this product in 2.5 weeks, so the 7th of July, and we're kind of testing some assumptions we have, because we're initially targeting this towards the human market, for humans to actually have this and produce food for them to actually consume themselves. But obviously, as I'm sure we're all aware, there's a lot of kind of other market segments that this could apply to, primarily kind of the education sector, as well as the pet food sector. So, if you have lizards, chickens, fish, for example, and like we had Benjamin saying earlier, that's basically kind of in a nutshell what we're doing and where we're going. And so I just really wanted to kind of share with you our journey and what we're launching in a few weeks, and yeah, just kind of connect with like-minded individuals in this edible insect sector, and I'd love to kind of meet up, do collaborations, and really network with everyone here to really kind of understand and get a broader idea of what's happening in this industry. Sorry, that was quite brief. I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions around what we're doing, which will probably compensate for time. But yeah, that in a nutshell, that's what we're doing, and we're currently based in Loughborough, Leicestershire, so not too far from you, Joe, in Nottingham, only like less than half an hour, so it could be very interesting to talk more. And yeah, that's what we're doing at Be a Buyer, and I'll put the link of the website in the chat, because I'm sure there's a lot of questions about the product, so this could answer some things. But yeah, that's what we're doing.
Thanks, Thomas. Anyone want to? Adam, is that a question from you?
Yes, yeah. Well, and maybe more of an observation than a question, but because I've done a little bit of outreach with local schools in Lincolnshire, where I'm based, and also with the crickets, and also donated some stick insects for them to look after, and it seemed to go down really well. The primary schools really seem to get on board with the whole idea of sustainable agriculture and just quite interested in insects in general. And I imagine a product like yours would go down really well in a classroom setting, maybe structuring some kind of module around it. So yeah, just an idea really. I think it would be worth looking at that, going down the school route.
No, exactly, Adam. That's an area that we're definitely looking at. I think it has a lot of gains to be made. Yeah, thanks for that advice.
I guess people like Adam who are keen to promote insects would be potentially good ambassadors for you as well, if they've already got links to their local schools. Okay, anyone else want to come in? Ben, again. You're muted.
Hello, Thomas.
Hello.
So, please don't take any of my questions as being particularly mean. But I'm quite interested. Well, because it's one of those, I mean, again, I'm very fascinated by the product because I think it's one of those things where actually, if you've got a good system and a good product, it can, rearing insects can sometimes be a challenge for pet keepers, and they often buy them, which can be even more of a challenge. But I think there are some, what sort of recommendations do you make to ensure that the end product is food safe? Perhaps that fits with maybe some of Joe's area, because obviously once it's in the hands of an end user, you don't know what they're going to do with their mealworms. Do you have a very detailed? Is the system such that the essentially the temperature, humidity, and everything is very, very good and very well controlled, so you're not getting something in your mealworms that you may not intend to get, which would then be eaten by humans or pets or whatever feeds on them? Or what sort of control? And I guess the other big issue that I think, because often you see bug-based systems, cricket-based systems presented to vegans and vegetarians as an alternative, but it can be a challenge in and of itself, because the big question I then have for you, especially considering that your end user will be euthanizing these mealworms and harvesting these mealworms, is how do you deal with that issue in the form of recommendations or in the form of what you suggest? Because I assume you recommend people freeze them, but that can be in and of itself a complication. It certainly is for a lot of reptile invert many keepers. So I'm fascinated by the product, I think, and indeed I think it's a very good thing, because actually, in my personal opinion, insects as food are actually probably best fresh, almost akin to shrimp. We don't grind shrimp into a flour and put that in products. I think in some respects the whole flour aspect, though very good, I think there are ways of doing stuff with cricket flour which makes it a phenomenal food ingredient. But actually, in some respects, actually having fresh crickets is the best way to eat them. I would be interested in other people's opinions. So I'm just interested in what your thoughts are. And I'm sorry if it comes across as because I know they're very difficult questions to answer.
No, not at all. So many questions in there where to begin.
Two questions then, Ben, to summarize, I think.
Yeah, I think this would be amazing to follow up with a phone call and talking after this, because I'd love to talk to you more about this. So maybe if I could address all those questions, because I would love to talk a long time.
We're quite happy to have a long chat with you. Quite
perfect.
Happy.
Yeah. That could be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, so you're right. So the temperature and other conditions for growing could be significant, but then also the question about how you dispatch the insects at the end, and the broader welfare points, and the observations and perceptions of people.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk to yourself, connect with you and follow up with these questions, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
In detail.
Anyone else? Josie, do you want to comment?
Oh no, it seems really exciting. Of course, I feel like I'm the negative one. I'm a bit concerned about the safety of it. Feeding on waste is something that we're actively investigating, and it does flag up some extra risks, but it's so exciting for people to be actually growing their own food. So yeah, I guess probably follow up separately, but really interesting, and be quite interested for teaching at the university as well.
Definitely, I'd love to follow up more with you, Joe. I'm sorry, excuse me, after you, Nick.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that the theme is there's a bit of a theme from Joe's talk as well about risk mitigation and balancing risks. My sense is that you can have a system which means the risk is next to zero, but that means that you actually are only feeding the insects on stuff that you would otherwise have fed to humans anyway. So the benefit that I've always felt from insects is that they can be fed on waste, but the restrictions on that in order to mitigate risks means that actually that happens very rarely. As any insect production grows and grows, the ability to find suitable, entirely safe waste streams diminishes rapidly, and people end up sort of farming for the insect feed. Anyway, any other comments? Adam, you want to come in again?
Well, no, just following on from that, Nick, I think you're probably right, but I think it's certainly possible to feed insects food waste. And I think as long as you ensure that you go through a suitable starvation period before the crickets are harvested, and that they're processed in a way that will reduce their microbial activity. So for example, we microwave sterilize all our crickets, and when we've had microbial testing done on them, they you know, it comes back as negative on these microbial counts. So and we're not feeding the crickets food that's, you know, feed that's suitable for human consumption. So I mean, I think it's certainly possible, and it probably depends on how you process them.
Okay, that's a helpful contribution. That's what Ben was not sure. Okay, anyone else? I mean, we've heard from a few people, but there's a few people who are also silent. So do come in if you'd like to comment. Otherwise, I think Ben is the next speaker.
Hello, can I share my screen? Let's see.
You can attempt that, yeah, if that works.
Can the host enable my screen sharing superpowers? I think it might be David. Oh, you're muted, David.
He's on.
So essentially.
Yes. So enable your screen.
Yes. Give me the superpowers. Do it, David.
Chat. Any? Let's see.
You know where that appears on the menu? Is it one of the settings or something?
I think there's a way.
Maybe that's why Joe couldn't do it either.
If it's down to me, anybody got a share screen? Is that maybe it's sharing my screen?
Sharing your screen, yeah. I think. Who has the hosting?
I've got that.
You should have the capacity. I don't know if you can click on my thing. If anyone else has experience with Zoom, because I can't remember how to do it. It's been a while since I've done it.
If you click on the image of Ben, you get 3 little dots. That offers you a menu of options. Does that include enable share screening?
Mute audio, stop video, chat, pin video. Is that it? Pin video, spotlight video?
Spotlight video.
Make host. I could make you host. How about that?
Try making me host. Let's see what happens.
There's full superpowers going your way.
And you could share the screen.
So,
you have share screen on.
Yeah, I can share the screen. Now the question is, shall I use these host powers for good or for evil? Can everyone see this?
Fantastic.
Yes. Can everyone see this? Okay, this is a stick insect. This is a series of transverse sections of a stick insect with a disease. It had fungal disease, is what I eventually diagnosed it with. And I guess this is something which is something that not very many vets do, and something that I've been fascinated by and have applied mostly to zoological collections and a little bit to bees, and I want to explore further into insect rearing, because in truth, and I suspect many of you are the same, I'm quite concerned about the insect rearing sector, because I think it's a very good sector and it's a very important sector that requires care and consideration, and that currently at the moment I think the veterinary interest is low. Or, certainly, in actual concrete interest. So I think many people will say, oh yes, it's very interesting, but actual concrete effort and interest is low. And I think actually, as an industry over the next 10, 20 years, I think veterinary input is one of those things that can help an industry thrive and an industry have a certain level of protection and a certain level of legitimacy, and that can in turn help that industry move forward. So in my mind, this is one of the fastest growing livestock industries in this country, UK, and I suspect the world. I think we are converting ourselves from a more mammalian-based protein generating system to a more invertebrate-based protein generating system for a whole plethora of reasons, and I'm sure we could go into huge amounts of detail about it. But what you're looking at here is histology and histopathology of an insect, and you can see some anatomical features which I love showing people. So you can see these paired respiratory tracheae, which is the respiratory system. You can see here a mouth effectively of a stick insect. You can see here an eye. So if everyone's seeing this, let me know. You can see a paired ganglion. So this is neurological tissue. And you can see this sort of tissue, which is white. This is something called fatty body, which is the storage tissue. It's essentially the fatty storage. And you can see a digestive tract here. You can see muscle here. So this is muscle fibers, which the insect uses to move its legs. And you can see here Malpighian tubule. So this is the equivalent of kidney. Now, and here you can see actually xylem. You can see plant material in the gastrointestinal system. So, you know, these are very beautiful creatures, but beyond the functional anatomy, having the ability to do this, which is something I've been developing over the past few years, not just the ability to do it, but the ability to interpret allows you to see problems. So this is a problem. So you've got this fatty tissue. So this is the fatty body. This is the storage sort of pancreatic liver organ of the stick insect. And you see here this black melanization.
That's feedback.
Oh, right. Okay.
So you can see that this represents pathology. Another one of my patients in the background, I'm sure. Again, you can see it further. Let me just find it. You can see it further here, more pathology. And you can use this to assess, you can use veterinary tools to assess when disease is present within a sort of system. So this is something that I'm trying to develop more in insect rearing. Now this is actually a reared insect. It was reared in a zoological collection for display and not for food. But when you see problems, and I think we're beginning to understand the problems that we're seeing now, because I think, you know, insect rearing has been something that has existed for a very, very, very long time. We have been eating insects for thousands of years, very true. But actually as an industrial process, I would say this is a very new process. And I think some of Joe's comments are very, very pertinent, because I think we're only just now understanding how to really keep these insects well. And I think I'm very interested, both from a research perspective, but also from a veterinary perspective, in providing people with the ability to investigate problems and to investigate things that they may not have had the option to investigate before. You know, so for me, the reason I'm sort of joining this webinar is because I've got a series of A, prospective farmers, and B, actual farmers, and C, academics who all have a stake in this industry. And I think one of the things I want to begin to instigate professionally is the ability to help people with insect systems to figure out when they have a problem, if they have a problem, what the issue is. I think sometimes the veterinary training will be helpful, just as a doctor is with an academic who's working on a form of, you know, genetic disease or a form of bacterial disease. I think, you know, the reason I'm sort of here and interacting with this industry is because I feel like my profession has an obligation to provide this sort of service and help, if it all makes sense. So that's pretty much, I just wanted to show you some cool images at the same time. Is everybody
Great.
happy? Is there any questions? I'll come off and de-screenify myself.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. And as you say, very cool pictures. Anyone want to ask a question? And I was interested just to know the stick insect that you were describing. What was it? Had it died of something, or were you just examining it?
This particular stick insect, I've switched the hosting back to David so I won't abuse my powers for evil. The stick insect was taken from a zoological collection, which was, the actual population was exhibiting fungal disease. This particular stick insect was euthanized for the process of doing histology. However, this population of stick insects was successfully treated. So essentially I had a series of them, and I split them into 3 groups, a normal group and 2 different treatment groups, and I gave them both different treatments to try and figure out the best way to treat. And of that set of insects, 1 insect recovered and continued to do well, but it was killing off stick insects essentially. And actually the initial treatment by the zoo was just to remove all the stick insects and separate them from the main population, because one of the reasons that there was a problem was because overpopulation had occurred. So again, this case is quite interesting from an insect rearing point of view, because your whole point of insect rearing is you're trying to grow as many insects and as much insect protein as you possibly can. But that just so happens to also, in any other animal, and indeed in insects, if you are putting humongous numbers of insects into a small space and your density is huge, that particular population will be rife for disease because it essentially represents a vulnerable population. So it's for this reason that battery farming is associated with disease and problems. And it's for this reason that sometimes you have respiratory disease in a herd of cattle in a shed, and the solution isn't to give all the cattle antibiotics. Sometimes the solution is to actually reduce your stocking density. So I think there are lots of performance indicators and indicators that we still need to understand and learn in insect rearing systems. And again, it probably fits quite well with Joe's work, because you're looking at your farm in Nigeria, and we're looking at our farms and our insect rearing systems. But the truth is, the equivalent systems in other veterinary fields, in other livestock fields, don't exist in the same way. So your livestock, for instance, your cows, you have a growth rate that is a performance indicator for your herd of cows. Milk quantity, butterfat milk content in dairy is another one. So I think we're still trying to understand, I would say, what are actually the best ways of. I'm quite happy to be corrected and for someone to come in and say, Benjamin, we do know what the best way of assessing performance in an insect rearing system or in a cricket-based system, but I sometimes struggle with the literature to find what those are. So I think that's, again, a research interest of mine.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a very legitimate area for research and hopefully for some solutions to be found. I think there's obviously, if you go to Thailand, they've got centuries of experience of farming insects as well as harvesting from the wild. And I don't know how well that's been documented and how optimized those farming systems are, and the level of disease or illness that has come from eating the insects. I think this is where my kind of concern is, that we kind of find that the ground which is between a sort of council of perfection, which would essentially probably mean that a lot of small scale farming operations would have to close down, and something which is a proportional response that helps to guide good practice and enable people to put sensible measures in place. And I'm interested again in what Adam was saying earlier about his own experiences in this. And I'm conscious we've got a couple of prospective insect farmers listening in who might be thinking this is all sounding a bit unmanageable. Adam, do you want to maybe comment from your experience?
Yes, so what I've found that so far, touch wood, issues I've had with crickets dying off seems to be more as a result of the conditions in the shed. So be that the humidity, insufficient ventilation, or the temperature being off. Because it's surprising when you have a shed full of crickets, how much air movement you actually need to stop the humidity and the temperature inside the actual rearing units themselves from spiking. So where I've had insects dying off before, that's been the main issue. And I don't know whether as a vet you would be able to come into a farming situation and comment on the environmental conditions as well as you know the actual disease issues.
I think that's what a vet needs to do, to be honest. And to be honest, that mirrors my own experience from when people have approached me with issues on their cricket systems or insect rearing systems. It's very rarely, because I think the nature of crickets, you know, it's more akin to fish farming than it is to cattle. I use cattle because it's something we're all pretty familiar with. But often when you're having an issue with that batch, it's not identifying what's wrong necessarily with that cricket batch. It's identifying where the conditions are such. So for instance, it could be that for some reason the ventilation system isn't working well, or the thermostat, which is monitoring the temperature, is only in one part of the shed. And then you have that discussion, you open up that discussion and you find out that the ventilation isn't turning on as it should. And there's some more, usually I'm finding it's actually quite a subtle conversation, quite a detailed conversation when you're really trying to peg down, you know, what is going on in that system, because every system is different. And again, the investigative processes here are as much a way of confirming what's going on and giving you more data. And I think in some respects, the histology I'm showing you it's new, it's very experimental. I'm still learning how to interpret it, because I think having that ability to interpret the data and having data allows you to get an idea of where the problem is, whether it's ventilation, whether it's stress, whether it's temperature, whether it's humidity. Because I think, again, I think I would agree with you. It's a conditional problem. And the other issue you can have, of course, is you have some issue with the food and then all of your insects die, or you have some issue with one part of your shed where the ventilation didn't work and you have a part of your crickets die. So I guess what I'm bringing to the table is a slightly different way of thinking and a slightly different perspective. Because again, I suspect many of you have a very good understanding. I'm in a train station, by the way, so occasionally a train will pass. Will have a very good understanding of how your cricket farms work and how your systems work. Just to sort of respond to Nick's point earlier on, I think there is no such thing as a perfect system in any situation. And I think as a vet, what you're learning to deal with is the pragmatic truth of what you're dealing with. And, you know, I suspect big systems will have different problems to small scale systems. And I think it very much depends on what the purpose of the system is and what the end goal is. Because some loss, some lack of optimization, some lack of productivity would be acceptable in one system, but not acceptable in another. Classic example of that would be, again, cattle. An extensive, your cows are on the side of a field eating grass, versus an intensive, your cows are in a shed system being fed an amount of food to really make them grow at the highest amount possible. Your extensive system, cows on the side of a field, your production does not need to be high. But your intensive system, if your production is low, there's an issue. So it's really about inputs, outputs. So again, this is something I'm just very interested in exploring more of and sort of understanding more about, especially in respect to insect farming, because I think, you know, this sort of thinking over the next 10, 20 years, I suspect will be helpful.
Okay, I'm keen to, we've got limited time left. I just want to see if anyone else wants to make a contribution or ask for help or have a question.
I had a question and just a quick comment as well. I think this whole conversation is very useful. I mean, we're looking to mass-produce black soldier flies, and so we're definitely trying to do one extreme of all of these options that you've just highlighted there. So we're trying to produce, margins are tight. We're trying to produce as many insects in as small a space as possible. So in our minds, we actually take a lot of inspiration from like chicken farming, and if we're talking about livestock, that's kind of the model that we think about a lot, and there's lots of similarities there to what we're doing. But just a question about your methods as well. Can you, I think more tools for diagnostics and stuff is always better, but I'm just curious what the advantages, if there are any, for this imaging for things like bacterial pathogens and stuff. Are there any advantages to that versus just fairly standard and quick microbiological testing and things like that?
I think you can see bacteria. I think sometimes you will detect bacteria that you wouldn't detect on culture and sensitivity. So the thing with culture and sensitivity is that the vast majority of culture and sensitivity is designed from a mammalian perspective, and you're looking for bacteria in an invertebrate. So this is a big problem actually for the entirety of the veterinary world, frankly, beyond invertebrates, avians and reptiles included, because all of your culture and sensitivities are designed to grow things more from a mammalian point of view. So I think your main advantage is that you can detect a wider range of pathogens. So depending on the sort of virus, you can even detect viral pathogens if you have inclusion bodies. And you can't detect specific that bacteria is this sort of bacteria, but you can see cocci and you can see rods, you can see fungi, but then the problem is it's an interpretation problem, and the actual limitation is not the technology. The limitation is the ability to interpret. And there are definitely limitations to histology, but I guess I'm more presenting the form of using clinical tools to diagnose. But I think in your system, what's interesting isn't necessarily disease. It's discerning the difference between a surviving animal and a thriving animal, because your metric, Matt, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but your metric might be we have an end product at the end of it, where the metric might need to be, is the production high enough? And I think actually that's one of those things that it's a very different set of questions. So you might be interested in this application of this technology more for assessing the size of different organs, which you might find is associated with a certain level of production, to tell you that your production is actually going in the right direction, not so much to help that batch of insects, but to think about your future batches. But again, I think there's lots of simple technology which doesn't involve histology. So I think that I have a lot of questions, and I'm still developing answers.
Okay.
Sorry, Nick.
That's okay. There's a lot there, isn't there, clearly? And as you say, it's not as developed as it needs to be. And one of the things we did look at a while ago was insect farming standards. And I think some standards are now coming out of the IPIF network. And there's some guidance on insect welfare that's been published in Holland that people might be interested to have a look at. I think we've got links to it on our website. But it sounds like there's plenty of work for Ben going forward, and potential for maybe some collaboration around kind of his ideas, and then working with actual insect farmers to see how practical they are and what can be done. He and someone called Christina have been having an exchange on LinkedIn, because she's also a cricket farmer, and asking some practical questions, which they've agreed we can share through the Woven network. And I think Ben's a great source of ideas and information. So we will hope to keep him in the loop. I think he's one of our designated experts within Woven. Thank you, Ben. So just before we close, I'm very keen to have any feedback on how you felt this went. Was this kind of what you were expecting? I felt the numbers actually were about right. There was enough that people could kind of feel they can contribute if they need to. You can get Zooms with hundreds on, which I think is probably a different experience. But anyone want to comment on something that they felt could have been maybe done a bit differently, might have been helpful? Definitely Hush.
Hi, Anne here. I was just wondering if everyone could just sum up in the chat the company they are from and their contact details.
Which
everyone
company?
Who wants
Sorry?
to share them.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you said the invitation is there for everyone to give their contact details in the chat. And David, we can, when we write all this up, we can share that as well. And we have been recording this. Does anyone feel they wouldn't want us to share the recording? You can contact me privately if you'd like to do it. Jeff? Jeff, do you want to be unmuted?
Oh, hi. Oh no, I was just confirming that all good. My internet connection's quite terrible in the office.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all. Just confirming.
And what? Okay, thank you. Well, hopefully it's been useful. We did it at midday because we wanted to allow for people in different directions from the UK, east and west, to have a chance to join in. But I don't know if the timing was good or bad for people. Just drop me a line if you've got any suggestions or thoughts, and we'll organise another one in about a month's time and see how it goes. Okay. Thank you very much. I think I'll close at that point. Thank you. Thanks a lot, David and Adam.
Thanks, everybody.
Right, yes, goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Great. Bye.
Thank you.